Unfortunately, the question period time was not included on the agenda, but we will be opening it up for questions at the appropriate time. So please get your questions ready or submit them now if you like. Okay, next we have approval of the agenda.
Move approval.
Seconder?
We need to add the questions?
No, it's, yes, you can.
Okay, with the addition of questions number 4.1.
Yeah. Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Sullivan, all in favor? Carried. Delegations. That the committee received the delegation of Kevin Plummer, Senior Program Manager, the RCMP, Contract Administration, and Catherine St. Dennis, Director, BC RCMP Service Delivery Police Service Division Policing and Security Branch Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General regarding RCMP policing contract with local governments.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Welcome, Kevin and Catherine, to our council meeting. And you are going to be making a presentation. Yes, it's come up on the screen, so please feel free.
Perfect. So thanks for having us. Just wanted to start off by introducing ourselves. So I'm Kevin Plummer, Senior Program Manager with the RCMP Contracts Management Team, with a focus on RCMP resourcing and service delivery at the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General. I'll let my director introduce herself.
Thanks, Kevin. Hello, everybody. I'm Catherine St. Dennis, Director for the BC RCMP Service Delivery Unit with the province. And our team look after the contracting requirements between the province and the RCMP as our service provider for policing in the province. So thank you very much for having us today. We appreciate it.
Perfect. And our team also works really closely with colleagues at RCMP E-Division headquarters. And I believe a couple of them are joining us on the call. So I'd let them introduce themselves as well. I'll pass it over to you, Alana, if you're there. Maybe they're not available or on mute. So we're supposed to be joined with Inspector Alana Dunlop and Inspector Erica Moore from RCMP E-Division headquarters, as I mentioned. And we have a question period at the end, and hopefully we'll be able to answer all your questions. But we also were joined by my colleague, Eric, who he'll also document any questions and that sort of thing. So if there's anything we're not able to answer on the call, we'll definitely get that to you afterwards and so on. So, oops. I just got to get, there we go. So our purpose today is Village of Cumberland's on sort of the long list of municipalities that have potential to emerge above 5,000 population at this year's census. So thanks for having us so that we can talk about what that process, if Village of Cumberland emerges and becomes responsible for policing, what that process would look like. In terms of our presentation, we're going to sort of start at a high level in terms of policing legislation and agreements and that sort of thing to get the background on how things are both, working now, and then what it would look like should you emerge, and then, talking about your specific jurisdiction and so on. So this is kind of a single page look at the various legislation and policing agreements and so on that, go into the organization and structure of policing in British Columbia. So in terms of the legislative side of things, policing is, administration of justice is delegated as a provincial authority or responsibility in the Constitution Act and so on. And so every province has its own governing legislation. For us, that's the BC Police Act. And then on the federal side, the RCMP Act establishes the RCMP and then also allows the RCMP to enter into agreements and so on. I'd also just draw attention to, in the top right corner, there's a sort of box on its own referencing the RCMP collective agreement. Now, as you may be aware, this past summer, the RCMP collective agreement was ratified. So this was negotiated between National Police Federation, which is the union for RCMP members, and Treasury Board Canada as the employer of the RCMP. And we're sort of including it on that, summary page showing all the agreements and that sort of thing, because it's going to impact upon RCMP police service delivery and that sort of thing into the future. So it's sort of, on par with the agreements and that sort of thing. And it'll sort of be a common refrain throughout the discussion today. It'll crop up in a number of places and that sort of thing. And it's really just because, it's new and not all the impacts of it being implemented have been sort of fleshed out and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a, keep it in the background as we're talking and so on. All right, so in terms of the agreements that actually, impact upon RCMP policing agreement or policing in BC, it's these three agreements here. So there's the Provincial Police Service Agreement between Canada and BC, and this is the agreement in which the province has contracted for the RCMP to act as provincial police service. And so when I say provincial police service, I mean both in terms of detachment level general duty policing for provincial jurisdictions, as well as a range of specialized functions and so on that provide service across the province and so on. And then there's the Municipal Police Service Agreement, again between Canada and British Columbia. And this is really the agreement that allows municipalities to enter into agreements to have the RCMP police in municipalities. So if you think of the MPSA as an umbrella agreement, operating within that umbrella are the Municipal Police Unit agreements. And so that's the agreements between each municipality that has chosen to have the RCMP as municipal service, and British Columbia, the province. So, and when I say each municipality, I mean each municipality above 5,000 population. In talking of the organization and structure of policing in British Columbia, there's a few, things to sort of cover in terms of the provincial government's role. So, the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General, he's responsible under the Police Act for ensuring an adequate and effective level of policing and law enforcement across British Columbia. So even in areas where municipalities, have gone above 5,000 and are responsible, there's still, the minister still has ultimate authority to ensure that each municipality is adequately policed and so on as well. In addition to the minister establishes policing priorities and goals and objectives for policing in BC and the Provincial Police Service. The Director of Police Service is a position appointed by the minister within our branch. It's our Assistant Deputy Minister for our branch in Public Safety and Solicitor General. Their role is to superintend policing and law enforcement in the province. Part of that is administering and overseeing RCMP agreements and First Nations policing agreements, establishes provincial police standards, and inspects on the standard and quality of policing in the province. So in terms of the provincial responsibility for policing, under the Act, the provincial government is responsible to provide policing and law enforcement to rural and unincorporated areas, as well as municipalities under 5,000. And as mentioned before, that's done through the Provincial Police Service Agreement. And so this is how Cumberland, is currently receiving policing and so on through the Comox Valley Provincial Unit. Provides policing to Cumberland as well as all, the unincorporated area, within the detachment's service area. But I'll get into that more in a little bit. So, in terms of the Provincial Police Service Agreement, the other key point to raise with it, not previously mentioned, is that, by entering into that, it allows the province enjoys the cost share of, we pay 70% of the cost base and the federal government pays 30%. And, the federal government's contribution is just in the recognition of the benefits they receive from having, by having a contract police arrangement. So to fund policing, provincial policing in British Columbia, the province, charges the police tax. So, for example, currently the residents of Cumberland would be contributing to the cost of policing through a police tax. If Cumberland emerges above 5,000 population, then residents would no longer be subject to this tax and so on. The two main points to sort of raise with the police tax is it's the amounts that your residents are assessed for the police tax aren't associated directly with the costs of policing Cumberland itself. It's they're contributing towards an overall cost for policing in the province. And the other thing to remember is it's not, it doesn't seek to recover like the full cost of policing in the province. It's just like frontline general duty detachment level policing in provincial jurisdictions and so on. Okay, so now getting into if what applies if Cumberland does emerge above 5,000. So under the Police Act, municipalities with a population of 5,000 persons or more must provide policing and law enforcement within their community. And then there's three sort of scenarios or options that municipalities can pursue. One is with the minister's permission, can establish a municipal police department. So that's your Victoria PD, that's your Vancouver PD, New West PD, and so on. Or can enter into an agreement with the province to have the RCMP act as a municipal unit. And that's our team's area of responsibility in our ministry. And then the other option is a municipality can enter into an agreement with another municipal police department. So that's really the Esquimalt scenario where they contribute towards and receive policing from Victoria Police. So to go along with the responsibility to provide the policing and law enforcement, implicit in that is that municipalities must bear the necessary expenses to provide that service and maintain law and order. So that includes, paying for the police members themselves and the support staff, the accommodations for those members, and that's speaking in terms of policing facilities, like in terms of detachments and that sort of thing, or contributing to space in a detachment. And then, responsible for the cost of equipment and responsible for police lockups and care and custody of police prisoners. So again, with the three options, once a municipality emerges, if you choose the path of a municipal police department, then, you're paying for all costs related to the operation of that police department, and the governance comes through police board. If there's an agreement with another municipal department, then, it's paying, the full costs of however that's negotiated between the municipalities, and then the governance again comes through a police board. Or to enter into an agreement with the province to have the RCMP act as a municipal unit. You're still technically responsible for the full costs, but you have the benefit through an RCMP agreement of the cost share, where the municipality would pay 70% and the federal government would pay 30%. And then there's certain costs that would still be 100% the municipality's responsibility. And those are support staff and accommodations predominantly. And then with this option, the governance really comes through the terms and obligations and that sort of thing as laid out in the RCMP agreements themselves. All right, so since 2012, when the RCMP agreements were last renewed, all municipalities that have newly emerged above 5,000 population have ended up choosing to enter into an MPUA to have the RCMP continue to provide municipal policing. Municipalities reach that decision on their own and so on. It's sort of your purview and so on. From our experience, some of these, the reasoning and so on applied is in terms of the municipality having greater control over policing and so on within their municipality compared to when you're getting it through the municipal service. So, mayor and council gets to establish policing priorities in terms of what's important for your public safety concerns and so on. So you get to establish priorities for your municipal unit. There's reporting, between detachment commander and, mayor and council and that sort of thing as governed by the agreements. We'll get to a bit of a discussion on resourcing shortly, but I mean, in terms of a control aspect, municipalities, can choose to have a higher level of resources and so on in order to, have to address particular priorities in the community or to, shorten response times, et cetera. In entering into MPUA, there's also some, continuity between, receiving service from the RCMP provincial unit to having it from an RCMP municipal unit. And there's still connections in terms of, it's still housed at the same, detachment and that sort of thing. So there's still that sort of benefit of interoperability and so on. And then in terms of the financial implications, it's as mentioned, the municipalities with an MPUA get that 70-30 cost share with certain costs at 100%. And then the only other thing to sort of mention with financial implications is, I'd mentioned, RCMP collective agreement and that sort of thing. And, that's just one of these other items that, should there be new policies established and that sort of new RCMP policies and so on established, then, an MPUA municipality is also, bound by whatever new policies might come into place and that sort of thing. Okay, so again, stepping back to the organization and structure of policing, just wanted to briefly touch on policing in First Nations communities. Under the Act, policing jurisdiction is really geographically based. So I don't believe it's the case for Village of Cumberland, but if there were reserves or treaty lands within municipal boundaries, then that would be a municipality above 5,000 responsibility to police. If there are reserves or treaty lands in the unincorporated area, the provincial jurisdiction, that's the province's responsibility to police. And there is a federally run program, First Nations and Inuit policing program, that provides, where agreements are in place, provides resources that provide enhanced policing for Indigenous communities that have agreements. Again, that's not in place currently at Comox Valley Detachment, but we just mention these things because things can change over time, and the important thing to remember with the FNIPP program is that it's an enhancement and over and above general duty provincial policing and so on. So in terms of specifics with Cumberland and so on, as I mentioned, like because you're currently under 5,000 population, you're policed through the Comox Valley Provincial Unit, which provides service to Cumberland, as well as the whole provincial area, which is essentially the yellow on the map. Now you'll be able to get a better version of this map because one of the things we're working on at the moment is finalizing policing information packages, which will provide more background and that sort of thing on the policing agreements, the specific clauses in those agreements and what they mean for municipalities and so on. Again, should you enter an MPUA, should you emerge above 5,000 and enter an MPUA. And it'll also provide, some background on current policing and what it would look like if Cumberland emerged. So currently at the moment, the Comox Valley Provincial Unit operates within the Comox Valley Detachment, which is an integrated detachment where there's a municipal unit for Comox, municipal unit for Courtenay, and those two municipalities and the provincial unit all operate in a integrated fashion. So this slide just reiterates some of what I've said, but also, provides the table in terms of the current strength of the provincial unit. Now, keep in mind, there are other provincially funded resources based at the detachment, but this is, the general duty and general investigative services positions that the province has at the detachment, which is, for all intents and purposes, is kind of the way to look at, like, this is our frontline complement that operates as the Comox Valley Provincial Unit. Okay. So now, if revisiting the web, we're now sort of down to if Cumberland emerged and entered into an RCMP agreement. So in terms of key milestones for emerging municipalities and so on, like last winter, Statistics Canada did the census and completed the enumeration and so on. The census is the basis of determining populations under the RCMP agreements and Police Act. So as I mentioned, right now, we're trying to finalize policing information packages. There's key pieces of information that we are still working on, and this is tied to the collective agreement and so on, as I mentioned, that we're still trying to work through to have those packages as complete as possible so that we can get them to you. The next key date is going to be when the census is released on February 9th. That's when we're going to know Cumberland's above 5,000, Cumberland's below 5,000, and if you are above 5,000, then the actual transition to the municipality assuming responsibility for policing would take effect April 1st. So we'd have a pretty tight timeline to enter into MPUAs and an MPUA and so on. But this tight turnaround is the same as, in 2017 and previously when new municipalities have emerged. The census is always released around the same time, and it's doesn't do us any favors for timelines, but it's what we have. So in terms of returning to impact of the collective agreement and that sort of thing. So this is really where we've unfortunately hit a bit of a snag in terms of the level of detail that we've been able to provide municipalities to date, because in that information package that we would provide, we like to provide an articulation of what the minimum resource levels required for a municipal unit would be, and I'll get into more details in just a second, as well as what the remainder of for the provincial unit would become, and then associated with that, cost estimates in terms of what exactly that starts to look like in terms of municipal costs and so on. So as I've mentioned, because it's the RCMP is now a unionized environment and there's a collective agreement in place, there are some ongoing discussions between National Police Federation and Federal Treasury Board, and those are confidential, and we have at the province, we aren't a negotiating party and we have no inside knowledge to it or anything. But some of those discussions could have an impact on what minimum resource levels look like and so on. And so that's where, we're just haven't quite been able to provide that piece of information. But I mean, what I can say is our leadership at the ministry and leadership at RCMP E-Division headquarters are trying to work through it so that we can resolve it as quickly as possible. So as I mentioned, if we were to enter into an MPUA, part of the terms of the MPUA would define the minimum resource level for the authorized strength for that municipal unit. And so when a municipality first emerges, the way we do that is we look at the historic workload for the provincial unit as a whole, and the historic workload of the provincial unit that took place within Cumberland boundaries. And then we sort of work with the RCMP. And again, we work with the RCMP at the ministry at the headquarters level, but then they also consult internally at the RCMP. They consult at the detachment level and so on, so that detachment commander and so on are able to provide contextual information and that sort of thing, make sure that these types of discussions are well informed by the current activities and historic activities of the provincial unit. And so in terms of the workload and so on that we look at, we look at multi-year data for calls for service. So that's your calls to 911 that have occurred, reported criminal code offenses and reported drug offenses. So that's, your crime statistics and that sort of thing reported up through Statistics Canada. And then we also look at other municipalities of similar profile in terms of size, in terms of workload, and that sort of thing. And that allows us to just ensure that whatever minimum resource level recommendation we're coming up with is in line with established precedent across the province and so on. That, and, this would be used to determine, what that number needs to be in entering into an MPUA. Once an MPUA is in place, the municipality is able to, increase over time as your, service delivery needs change and so on. As you have particular priorities that you want addressed and so on, you can increase and determine your own level and so on. As I mentioned, the other key piece of information in the policing information packages that we're not able to quite nail down in the level of detail we'd like at the moment for you is the estimated costs, but we can at least talk about what the costs, what costs factor into what you should be considering in potentially assuming responsibility. So number one is, the per member costs in terms of the size of the unit, per member costs in terms of salary, benefits, indirect costs, direct costs, and so on. and then police overtime costs. Whoops. And both of those are within the cost base that gets apportioned out with the cost share of 70% to the municipality, 30 to the RCMP. And then support staff and accommodations are both 100% costs, but for both of those, you know, in an integrated detachment like Comox Valley, where there's other municipalities, there may be opportunities to discuss with other municipalities in terms of contributing towards support staff, you know, provided by another municipality and that sort of thing. For accommodations at Comox Valley Detachment, it's a federally owned building, so there's a standard provincial rental rate. And so those are the, oops, my computer keeps skipping ahead on me without me touching it. So these are the anticipated costs, but you know, you could also expect that there could be additional costs for provision of services that have to be borne by the municipality. So there may be extra arrangements for particular services or support that exist within the detachment or at the RCMP. Or if an event or occurrence takes place within the village boundaries that requires additional resourcing needs or services, the village would be responsible for those costs as well. And that just sort of gets built into you know, what the RCMP is billing you for and so on. So in terms of next steps, I mean, really, if the census shows that Cumberland has emerged, then we will be having numerous more discussions, getting into more details, potentially, and so on, working towards a municipal police unit agreement, provided that's, you know, what you think the municipality will likely pursue. So, I mean, we're here today. We've gave some of the background and you know, so on, but there's always opportunity for further, you know, discussion and that sort of thing as we move ahead. So before I open it up to questions for Mayor Baird and councillors and so on, I just wanted to pass to my director, Catherine, and see if she had anything to add.
Thanks, Kevin. Not particularly, other than just to highlight that when it does come to determining the minimum resourcing levels, obviously based on the information that Kevin's provided, you know, there's definitely an evidence-based approach to assessing that, as informed by the RCMP, and obviously discussions will occur with the municipality. But it's also recognising that provincially, just a reminder that the minister does have responsibility for ensuring that there is an adequate and effective level of policing across the entire province. So I just want to highlight his responsibility under the Act, which I know is mentioned, but I just want to emphasise that. So that is something that does need to be taken into consideration as well. But that was all. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you very much. What we generally do is go around to ask each councillor member if they have any questions. And we'll start with Councillor Kettler tonight.
All right. Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to the presenters, Kevin and Catherine. So I do have a question. One of the things that when we've talked about what a municipal police force would look like is that if any serious crime happens, such as a murder, that that it would the cost would skyrocket for us because we wouldn't have necessarily officers that could deal with that. You would have to hire them, contract them out, I guess, special investigation unit and stuff. Is that accurate?
Yes, I mean, with like one of the benefits of being or participating in a integrated detachment is that there's more likelihood, because there in terms of there being a critical mass of resources and so on, that there can be a range of specialized functions located at that detachment that can provide service, to the entire area and so on. But if something does happen that reaches a threshold that exceeds the capacity of the detachment in terms of the seriousness, that sort of thing, then yeah, it could require specialized functions, brought in to work on something at a, at a cost to the municipality.
Likely an unaffordable cost. Is that the experience? For a small municipality, I'm saying.
Kevin, I might just jump in if I may. So, one would hope that the likelihood of such an event occurs, very rarely for the municipality. So being able to draw upon the broader resources to bring those in on an as needs basis for that one time, really, unfortunately, it can be expensive, but it sort of depends on the extent of what the event is that we're talking about. However, to bring some specialized service in for a particular incident or event, generally across the board, it's going to be less than what it would be to be able to be providing those services yourself as if you opted to go down as a municipal police department, for example. So those costs you would have to be ensuring were there, those teams were there all the time in the event of, in case something was going to happen. Whereas this way, it's as it happens, then you can bring them in.
Okay, thanks for that. I do have another question about the presentation. So you mentioned the First Nations and Inuit policing, and then you said that it was an enhancement. Is that like an additional service, additional cost? Can you expand on that a little bit?
So that wouldn't, absolutely, and that wouldn't be a cost to the municipality or anything like that. We provide that sort of extra background on First Nations policing because it's an area we find that there's a good deal of confusion across the board, or lack of awareness, I guess, across the board in terms of where responsibilities lie and that sort of thing. So the FNIPP, it's a federally led program, but it's a cost shared program between the federal government and provincial government. At a slightly different cost share and so on. But so Indigenous communities that have entered into a community tripartite agreement would then have an FNIPP resource or resources assigned to them. And that resource is funded to spend 100% of their time dedicated to the needs of that assigned Indigenous community. So we include that because sometimes, it's not so much at Comox Valley because there isn't a resource there for FNIPP, but at other locations, they can be sort of used for general duty and things like that. And they're really not supposed to be. They're supposed to be 100% dedicated to their assigned Indigenous community. But that program would have no cost for the municipality or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, and thanks, Kevin and Catherine. So just to be sure, the census is the only thing that triggers this emergence. Is that correct?
Well, if there's also, the other situations where it has to be looked closely at is if there's I'm not sure the exact correct terminology, but sort of amalgamations of other areas into the municipal boundaries. Like if the municipal boundary is redrawn, then that can also, create a population increase. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, its census population is used as the basis for the Police Act and the agreements.
So if we're under 5,000 on February 9th, just there's no arbitrary time the next couple of years that then suddenly the province is like, hey, before the new census, we're going to bump you up. That's not how it happens.
Yeah, it's like what happens in between censuses is our ministry proactively monitors BC Statistics' annual population estimates to just sort of get a sense of population trends for municipalities like Cumberland that are sort of on the cusp, and then we sort of start to engage and so on. As we did, we sent a letter back in 2019, and we've had some conversations in the fall and stuff here with some of the city staff. So there'd be no risk of a new timeline. It's February 9th, you're under 5,000. That means for all intents and purposes, you remain under 5,000 until the census in 2026 is the next opportunity for emerging.
Great, thanks. If I just could ask one more.
Yep.
Just to tag on to Councillor Kettler's question for Catherine, just to clarify, so if we were to investigate a municipal police force, the question about something like a murder, did you say that there was an insurance for something like that? Is that what I?
No.
No. Okay.
No insurance. I was saying if you became a municipal police department, so you would be standalone, so not part of the agreement where you've sort of subcontracted the RCMP as part of subcontracting part of the provincial service to be the municipal unit. As a municipal police department, then you are responsible for the costs of investigating a crime in that area within your jurisdiction. So Vancouver, for example, fully responsible for investigating any major crime within the Vancouver boundary.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you so much for the presentation, both of you. Okay, what questions are left? So following up on the census, so even if we were 4,999 people, we'd still be good for another 6 years?
5 years, yeah.
Yes.
5 years.
Yep.
5.
Okay, good, thank you. And then, so you said that when the minimum service number happens, you look back to statistics for a number of years. Is there a set number of years that you look back to, or what's that scope?
In the policing information package is this year. We've done 3 years, and that's with availability of data from RCMP and that sort of thing, because we're also looking at, not just, what we've tried to do this year is not just look at, straight crime statistics, but also, in terms of occurrences that the police were called out for that might not be criminal, like captured in the criminal statistics, because that is we're trying to have a really fulsome assessment of, demands and draw on police.
Okay, thank you. And
can I just add? Sorry, can I just add to that? We do, as Kevin was saying, we really want to understand the specific needs of the community and what it is, how the crime has been either evolving or the service standards or anything within your community. And that varies from community to community. So we're not simply just sort of looking at, you need these things and that's it, and we apply that across the board. So if there was anything such as, a community that was also a resort community, for example, that had really high peaks and saw different spikes in crime levels throughout the year or at certain times of the year, that's something that we would also take into consideration. So it is unique for your community.
okay, great, thank you. And then I'm just trying to understand the way it works. So Comox has its own office, I presume, with someone in there, some administrative support or something. We're responsible for administrative support and offices. So when we get to 5,000, is that what we're required to do? We're then required to have an office and have police presence. And if so, right now there are I think not, it said 19. There was a total of 19 positions in the Comox Valley. So when we add Cumberland, are we adding officers to that base number? Or just like, I'm trying to understand exactly how the collaboration works within the valley with the different municipalities.
At the moment, there's 3 units based at the Comox Valley detachment. So there's Courtney Municipal Unit, Comox Municipal Unit, and I don't have their strength right in front of me at the moment, but I know we reference it in the policing information package that will come. And then there's the Comox Valley Provincial Unit. And so that's the table that I showed was, that's not the entirety of the detachment. That's just the provincial unit that provides service to Cumberland and all unincorporated areas and municipalities under 5,000 within the detachment's service area. So what would end up happening is, based on that assessment of, historic workload, we'd look at, so this is the total workload for the Comox Valley Provincial Unit. This is the amount of that workload that's associated with Cumberland that occurred within Cumberland boundaries over the last number of years. And then we would sort of apportion from that 19, a certain number would become, the number that's required to fulfill the workload historically that Cumberland has been associated with, sort of thing. So it'd be, the 19 would be, for all intents and purposes, split between a new Cumberland unit and then a remainder of the provincial area. And the expectation, from the province's perspective and so on, is we want the resources for each jurisdiction to be commensurate with the workload in that jurisdiction. So those that remain in the provincial area, their resources should be commensurate with the workload associated with the remainder of that provincial area. Does that help clarify?
A little bit, but now it gives me another question. So okay. if we have 19 humans in the Comox Valley Provincial Unit, and Cumberland joins that, and we start to pay a whole lot more money than we have been in the past, we don't get another, there's not a guarantee that we're getting actually more bodies, police officer bodies. We just get more of a share of where the bodies go, or?
Yeah, in splitting from, like splitting out a municipal unit from that larger provincial unit, you would then have, the municipality would then have more direct control over that, your municipal unit, in terms of priorities and things like that. If you chose to increase that municipal unit, you certainly could. Some of the discussion we're having in terms of, minimum resource level and so on is to get to what is the minimum number of resources that would need to be listed in the municipal policing unit agreement to get it off the ground. And then once you have a unit in place and you're directly working with the RCMP detachment commander in terms of your priorities and resourcing needs, then you can, that municipal unit can sort of grow and evolve to fit, mayor and council's priorities and vision and so on.
But it's still a shared unit with the rest of the Comox Valley.
Can I jump in?
Yes, of course, Catherine. Yep.
So I know it's very confusing, but I'm going to try and do this simply, and I'll have Kevin correct me in case I say something I shouldn't say. So I'm just going to use like super basic math. This has nothing to do specifically with your area. It's purely for the purposes of an example. So let's just say we currently have a town that is serviced by a provincial detachment that has 3 towns that it supports. And they currently have a total membership of 30 people. So those 30 officers service those 3 areas. Now, one of those towns is going to emerge above 5,000, and then they have to assume some responsibility. So what is being happened is, while they were in this broader, what we'll call a provincial jurisdiction, now it becomes 2 jurisdictions. It becomes still the provincial jurisdiction, but a piece of it has been carved out and is now a municipal jurisdiction. Now, through the work that we do with this process, when we're identifying what the minimum requirements are, looking at the workload, the calls for service, all of that, it's been identified that really the minimum resource level to service that community, to ensure that there's adequate and effective policing for that municipal area, is 10 members. So what happens is, as Kevin mentioned before, not only are we having to have a look at what are the minimum service levels required for that municipal area, but then also we need to look at, okay, well, is 20 the correct number of members that we need to service the rest of the area, that provincial jurisdiction? And it might be determined that we need to maybe increase it to 25 on the provincial side, but 10 is okay for the municipal. And that's the piece that's done through this assessment once we get more of that information that is coming through. But you're not adding to the provincial unit. That provincial unit is being divided to the different jurisdictions based on their level of service needed. Does that help?
Can I jump in here a little bit, Councillor Brown? Because you're going the same way that I was, but I was taking it a little differently, in that in the past, we've shared police officers with Hornby, Denman Island during the summer, and the winter, Mount Washington. And we have been left behind sometimes with no policing in our community because of those areas. And that has been very frustrating for council to be dealing with, because that's what has happened in the past. The other part to that is we've been providing service to Courtenay also, because they are a bigger community, and they take the people that are going to be coming to Cumberland into Courtenay because they have bigger crime stats. So that's one of the concerns I have. The village council has been asking for a number of years for community policing, for the presence of the police in the community, because that is something that is drastically missing in this community.
Okay, so on that point, it's important to understand that even if you don't emerge, you still have a relationship with the detachment and the service level that is required. So there's a couple of different ways that can be managed. That's a slightly different conversation to what we're having right now in terms of the emerging municipalities, but that's something that we would certainly, absolutely have a talk to you about, and talk about some options that you might want to explore with the detachment remaining under 5,000 going forward. It might be best if we sort of have a different conversation about that piece, because there are things like service level agreements and things like that you can work in with the detachment to make sure that they are being met and that those services are being provided appropriately throughout the jurisdiction.
Okay, Councillor Brown, continue.
Yeah, thank you. So, and I understand that the minimum service level for any community is 4 officers. Is that still true?
No.
I can't speak officially for the RCMP. My understanding is there isn't a set RCMP standard in place for minimum detachment size and stuff. There are policies and so on in place for officer safety that then govern, how service is delivered and so on, so that officers are, safe and so on. But I don't think there's an established policy. Did you have something to add to that, Catherine? Or?
I was just going to say, part of what you'll be finding is, through the discussions with the collective agreement, they'll be looking at things like what is required to ensure officer safety. Absolutely. But in terms of, I think it's historically, I don't want to say how far back it goes, I'm not sure, but there was quite a focus on, the number of police officers per population sort of ratio. But that's something that we do look at, but it's not, we need to look at it in the broader context, because as I'm sure you can imagine, policing is quite complex, very multi-layered, and unfortunately crime is evolving. So it's not that one thing that we're looking at all.
Okay, thank you.
I could add as well, like part of the challenge with very small units and so on is also just being able to schedule. And so, you sometimes end up needing a critical mass of numbers in order to have a workable, schedule where members are on and members are off and that sort of thing. So that may play into, some of what you're referring to as well.
Right, of course, and sick leave and all that other
Exactly.
stuff you need.
Yeah.
Okay, I will continue. I have two other questions. One is, can they provide the offices that are needed? Because some communities require 10 or 12 and they don't always get them. So my understanding is when they have not provided those officers, they get money back at the end of the year under contract. Like the town of Comox, they have a certain requirement. They have to pay up front. When they do not reach that goal of having that many officers, then the money is returned to them.
I am actually not aware of those details.
Well,
I'm sorry to say. I can.
I think it's in the fine details of how the RCMP does invoicing for municipal units and so on, because I believe they invoice more or less in advance, divided up quarterly kind of thing. But then there's an adjustment made at a certain point to sort of catch up with actuals and so on. So if there have been vacancies, then presumably that could result in, a credit back kind of thing. I mean, I say that with the proviso that I am not a financial analyst, and the internal billing would be an RCMP thing for RCMP finance to explain to the municipality, but it would all be very clearly explained if you were receiving those types of invoices. But for our purposes, I think that's what you're probably alluding to.
Okay. The other question I have is around municipalities that are paying 70%, and then there's municipalities that are paying 90%. And my understanding is that the ones that are in the 70% bracket, it's run a little bit differently in that they try to join everything together, so it's not as expensive for a municipality, that it's put through all the municipalities in that bracket. Is that still continuing on?
Yes, exactly. So there's, as you said, there's two sort of thresholds within RCMP policing agreements. So there's the population 5,000 to 14,999, and then there's the over 15s. So over 15, it is a 90-10 cost share, and those municipalities are charged directly for their policing costs, in the sense that, they need to buy a vehicle, they get charged for that vehicle. Whereas for the 5 to just under 15,000 municipalities, it's the 70-30 cost share, and then it's pooled costs in terms of instead of, small municipalities that might need only one or two sort of pieces of equipment, RCMP ends up being able to do economies of scale, order for all of those size of municipalities and so on, and get a pooled cost rate. So it sort of manages costs more predictably and that sort of thing for, those smaller municipalities. And, the over 15s don't receive that sort of pooled cost benefit anymore. They just get charged straight.
Okay. And adding on to that, then, when a police car is damaged in a motor vehicle, they don't go to ICBC for insurance?
I would need to look into that. I don't know off the top of my
No.
head how it all works.
I don't believe so. No, I don't think. And I think E Division has now got their video up, so I don't know if they want to jump in. But I think insurance. This was a bit of a question that we had around the destruction that was experienced in Lytton with the loss of the detachment, but their assets are not insured because they can't Canada can't self-insure.
Interesting.
So I'm going to assume that it's going to be the same with the vehicles as well, because equipment, I think I'd have to double check, but provincially it's still property of Canada.
Interesting. Okay, anybody else have another question they wanted to ask?
Sorry, Mayor Baird, I just might ask if Alana Dunlop, if Inspector Dunlop has anything that she wanted to add on that in case I'm incorrect.
Yeah, well, specifically, hello, everybody. Specifically to vehicles, we don't deal with ICBC. So it is what Catherine has articulated as far as the insurance piece goes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. We have a lot to learn, and I'm sure we'll be keeping our fingers crossed for, I think it's February the 9th, the census comes out.
Yes.
So you know what we'll be hoping for.
Well, I can't imagine. I cannot imagine. Yes.
Yes, but if it doesn't come, if it comes the other way, we look forward to working with you.
Well, and am I able, Mayor Baird, to just ask sort of a quick question of like you and council?
Sure can.
Just as just while you're doing a presentation, it's kind of hard to ask a question of the audience without then getting into a question and answer period. But so from the city's perspective and so on, are you anticipating, I guess it's a twofold question. Are you anticipating emerging? And if you do emerge, is, the likelihood that you would enter an MPUA or seek to enter an MPUA? What's the city's perspective, I guess?
Well, I think we can go around the table on that one. I think it makes most sense to do that. I don't think we could financially bear the burden of forming our own. And with the proximity of the Courtney detachment, it does make sense. Councillor Kettler?
Yes, and I think, from a financial perspective, we've known it's coming. We have putting away reserves for it. I think we're all hoping, of course, that we're not. We know that we're close to that point. And yeah, I think that, we would be leaning toward contract RCMP service. And, like you said, there's emerging crime. There's a lot of online crime. I think there's a lot of things that we just wouldn't be able to deal with as a small municipality. So yeah, that's my perspective. Thanks.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think, it's if in an ideal world, I think we would love to have our own municipal police force that was serving exclusively Cumberland and dealing with specific Cumberland issues. But like both the mayor and Councillor Kettler have said, we likely can't afford that. And we wouldn't be able to deal with the kinds of policing that we need. So yeah, that's.
Okay, Councillor Sullivan.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, without murder insurance, I'm not sure we could run it alone. Cumberland does like to run things by ourselves when we can. Yeah, I think the MPUA, obviously, if everyone else has done it, I mean, this seems likely that our municipality would support that. Definitely hoping we don't emerge. I do know, looking at these statistics, as our population increases, our crime seems to decrease. So that's an interesting juxtaposition. So that's a fun little tidbit too, where the service calls decreased 31% last quarter. So anyway, there's that. So more people, less crime. I don't know where the rub is, but hopefully we don't emerge quite yet. But yeah, I would support an MPUA. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming forward to have this discussion with us.
Perfect. Thanks for
thank you,
having
Mayor.
us.
Thank you, Mayor Baird, and councillors. We really appreciate it. And Mayor Baird, we might reach out to you afterwards, regardless of whether or not you emerge, and just have a talk about the service levels that you raised here today, if that's all right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions.
Okay, I certainly will.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is reports. And I would ask that the committee receive the report on the asset management draft policy.
My receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. This is Clayton. Is this you going to speak first?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Baird. So what we have before you is a report relating to a draft asset management policy. And I actually just before I get into that, I just wanted to introduce I think our two consultants are on the, should be on the video here as well. So Troy and Todd, I see you both now. Great, thanks guys. So I'll provide just a very quick overview of how we got here. And then what I've asked Troy and Todd, who have been supporting staff through this process, helping us develop this draft asset management policy, to just provide a little bit of an overview for council, just to ensure that, again, that, one of the key pieces of asset management is making sure that we all are, speaking the same language and understanding what some of the key principles are there. So I'm going to ask that they provide a bit of an overview. And then certainly happy to answer any questions for council that they may have relating to the policy here. So as council's aware, one of the strategic priorities was to develop an asset management policy. And so in 2021, we did conduct a couple of workshops, both with council and one with staff. Our consultant did support us through that process, again, providing some education and training. We also did, through that process, review asset management readiness scale there to see where we were as an organization. And I think we've done a lot of good things as an organization, and we've made a lot of progress. However, one of the things that certainly recognize, we have a lot of information, a lot of different areas, and this is an opportunity with the policy to bring that information together and have a overarching guide, which the policy is intended to be. So how the policy was developed was through with our consultants' support. We had all of the department heads and staff involved, and everything from our operations to our parks, finance and development, and we're able to have a conversation about what are those key principles, everything from obviously engineered assets to natural assets, and that's hopefully included in the policy. Hopefully council believe that that's been incorporated into it. there certainly is a lot of steps after this. This is, we're just getting rolling with the planning piece. So once a policy is adopted by council, there are a number of plans that we'll begin working on. And then the last thing I was going to mention, just from the financials, mentioned in the report there is a note in there. We still are awaiting a response relating to a grant that we applied for through FCM. And that grant certainly will assist us in continuing the work that we've done to date. If for some reason we are not successful, we're hoping to hear, we did get word just before Christmas that the grant is under review and we should have an answer shortly. And if once we hear from that, we'll be able to have a better idea of what those next steps look like. If we are not successful now, we will plan to come back to council with a bit of a, I'll call it option B in the sense of how we move this forward. So, so what we want to do is I'll pass it over to, I think, Todd, are you speaking behalf or is it Troy, Todd? Okay. But I wanted to mention, I mean, the main intent here was to bring this to the committee to allow a conversation to occur and answer some questions informally, and Troy and Todd could certainly support answering any of those questions. And then the recommendation that we have is that the village, the committee refer to this policy to council for consideration to be adopted, and that would be what we would be recommended here. And certainly, if there's any updates or changes, we can look at that now or come back with any information. So maybe if it's okay, I'll hand this over to Todd.
Thank you, Clayton. Can you hear me? Okay.
Okay.
Good thumbs up. Okay, good afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Todd Reichard. I'm with Exist Canada. I'm joined with my colleague, Troy Sykes, also one of the directors, along with myself for Exist Canada. And Clayton has asked me to kind of just give you a bit of a high-level overview, a bit of the process, as well as the policy and the intent. And, really the document reflects that sense of collaboration, that sense of commitment to really fully engage and to implement essentially those asset management principles throughout your corporation, which would include developing services and maintaining services that are financially, environmentally, economically, and environmentally sustainable. So, we applaud you for taking those steps forward. The policy itself is written at a fairly high level, as most policies should be, at least from my vantage point. And it really focuses on the high levels of assets. So you have your engineer assets, your living assets, and it also focuses on natural assets. And depending on your perspective, you have your neighbors across the inside straight there over Gibbons. They've taken it to another level of granularity. And intentionally, as we spoke and met with Clayton and his colleagues, we had guided, and our recommendation is to keep, at least at the policy level, fairly high level, to allow your organization to focus in specifically on strategies, and when you're developing plans, to get something a little more granular. Policies, from at least from my vantage point, in my years in public service, the wider berth to allow you to negotiate and to implement is easier. So really, you're at the first phase of, if you had a chance to look at the little drawing that Clayton circulated in the Asset Management BC group, you're at the front end. You've done your initial kind of evaluations and assessments. You're going to be into the planning phase now with essentially with the foundational piece of building a policy. Then you can move on to the strategic and planning implementation portions, which certainly from our vantage point is some of the points where the rubber hits the road and you really starts to involve your community. I mean, fundamentally, Cumberland sits adjacently to some other landowners. So it's really a partnership, not only from private, but from Indigenous lands, and the services and the safety that will be wrapped around this to your citizens will serve you well for the future. So I think at that point, I'll just leave it there. If you have any questions, Troy and myself would be happy to respond.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate your comments. And we'll start with Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Thanks so much for, it's really nice to see this policy come forward. I have a question around, I appreciate the definitions, including natural and living assets. And I'm wondering how we might incorporate sort of a commitment to or a preference for green infrastructure, so using natural and living assets rather than gray or built natural asset or assets in the objectives, because I don't really see that coming in, and I feel like that should be part of the sort of overarching goal of the policy, is wherever we can, we don't remove say a wetland and then build a retention pond, but we just keep the existing wetland in place. And so having that identified in the objectives, I think would be helpful in moving the
Sure.
forward.
Yeah, if I could respond to that, Councillor Brown, there is a statement in the principles, right, statement 1, that essentially says, this is ensuring that the village, that the natural, living, and engineer assets are provided in a manner that respects financial, cultural, economic, and environmental sustainability. And I think, to speak to your point, it would be detrimental to remove a wetland to put in a mall. Paved paradise, put up a parking lot or whatever. So it's captured there already. In essence, certainly you could put an additional objective in there. To me, that would be in the actual principles, a high level direction, and then specifically as you're looking at, say, your planning and design plan, you could target more direct granularity to speak to specifically to that. But I think at the policy level, I think it's captured there. But Clayton, perhaps you may be in a better position to respond to that.
And I did see number 1 under principles, and I guess we could just argue about whether it should be in principles or objectives.
Sure, absolutely. You guys know your policy.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't matter, but maybe Clayton wants to speak to that.
Sure.
No, it is a good question, and to be honest, that type of question was one, and Todd and Troy can recognize that's certainly one that went around a lot of conversation with staff as well, how we can emphasize this. So I think maybe what we can do is based on that comment, if council wishes to provide any direction on that, that's certainly something that we could look at incorporating that into objectives. I don't think it has to be specifically in principle, but it could be something that could be identified within one of those objectives. However, one of the things we did learn quite a bit in our conversations is, as Troy or Todd's mentioned, these future strategies and plans are really going to outline those specifics there. But we definitely want it to be identified within the policy there. So certainly we can move it if council wishes. That's not a problem there, or emphasize it in a greater manner. That's quite easy to do for sure.
Sure.
Okay. Next, Councillor Kettler.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is really important. It's pretty hard to plan without having a good asset management understanding. And so happy to see this come forward. You did mention Gibson's and how they actually have their natural assets on the books. So basically natural asset accounting. I kind of heard that that's not ruled out with this, that we could sort of incorporate it, I guess, under the principles. Say principle 1, ensuring that the Village Cumberland natural, living, and engineered assets are provided in a manner that respects financial, cultural, economic, and environmental sustainability. So with the financial part of that, though, that would require some type of assessment of the natural asset. So are we leaning that way, Clayton? And is the language strong enough in there regarding that?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So one of the things that we really tried to strive with this policy is being broad enough that does provide that flexibility to address those sort of objectives. One of the things I would say is, and Gibson's is, and we had lots of conversation about Gibson's, and there's no doubt that they've done some amazing work. I know councils, we've had a couple of workshops with staff from there. But one of the things that is recognized, and we've had some conversation with their staff as well, and their fundamental policy has changed, been updated a number of times since the original policy that they created. And it really comes down to that, that financial commitment as well. The policy allows us to have the guidance to be able to deliver on the key objectives and principles that council identifies. But we also have to come back with the plan and work through the plan, because there is some financial pieces. I mean, Gibson example has, a one staff member that is their natural asset coordinator. Like that's their job. That's the only thing they do. That is actually a staff position within the organization. So what we want to do with this policy is, if council is supportive of the policy, the plans will be how we actually deliver on it. So we'll have to come back and say, what does this look like? Do financially, is it something we want to invest in, similar to something like Gibson's, or is there other ways we can do that? Work with partners, and there's and I think Todd mentioned at the beginning, there's other stakeholders that are definitely at the table that we want to be working with on that. But it's a tough question to answer right now until we get into the plans. I think that's where we'll really be able to dive in. Because right now we're not asking for, this isn't actually specifically asking for dollars or funding to make that commitment. What it's saying is, these are the general principles and objectives that we're doing. And then now it's up to staff. We'll work through those principles and come back to council and say, here's the plan. This one may cost us this, or we can do this with our existing system. And this is, provide all those different levels of plans. So I think that's where in the next couple of months here, we will start being able to really dive a little bit deeper into how we can deliver on those, because it is a bit of a challenge right now. There's lots of different scenarios, I guess, that need to be looked at.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sullivan?
Yes, thanks, you guys. I just support the other councillors with one of our major priorities being our natural assets and protecting them as well. I'm just happy to see this policy. I mean, 3% useful life left in our buildings and stuff. No one said that this time around yet, but that's our reality in the village. So we have to replace all these assets, and having a clear vision moving forward for the future with everything. This policy is necessary. So thanks.
I will echo council's comments, and I think this is a very good start in the beginning for our policy, and I look forward to what comes out of this. So thank you very much.
Indeed. Okay.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's no further questions. Thank you very much. It was wonderful to chat with you this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
We'll take our leave. Okay.
Thanks for waiting.
Bye-bye. Okay. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Next, we have
Your worship, is it possible to have a recommendation for this to be referred to council for consideration? Yes.
The recommendation is there on page 2.
So that's asking us to adopt the asset management policy. Do we want to bring it back before we adopt it?
So because we're in committee of the whole, it would be referring it to council for consideration to adopt. So that will be your chance to discuss it if there's anything further, but that will be the chance. It wouldn't be adopted here today. This would be referring to council for that to be considered.
Okay, so I'll move that the committee refer the asset management policy dated January 24th, 2022 to council for adoption.
Yes. Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, that the committee receive the Recreation, Arts and Culture Master Plan Process Overview Report for discussion.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. Good
We've been looking
afternoon.
forward to this report, so
Right on. Well, it's a project that, yeah, I'm excited that we've now embarked on and wanted to provide council or this committee of council with an update on kind of the framework or the vision for the project and how it's going to unfold in the months to come. So essentially, that's what this report is. It just lays out the work plan for the planning process and provides a little bit more background information. So we've now hired HCMA as the lead planning consultant, who are going to work closely with Gabby Haas, who's another recreation planning professional and has very experienced in many small communities in BC. So super excited about the consultants that we've retained to help the village lead this forward. And yeah, what the report really does provide is an overview of the steps and some of the key milestones along the way. And then specifically, it provides some information on what the intent is in terms of engaging council, and then of course open to any discussion or input, so you guys can help shape the process. So the quick overview is really it's a 4-stage process. We've embarked on stage 1 now. The data collection and review meetings have occurred, and there's a few coming up, including some facility tours next week. I'm going to say we're slightly behind. As everyone's aware, COVID has once again impacted recreation rather hard over the last several weeks. So in responding to that, we've had to allocate time, of course. But that being said, yeah, I don't think we're too far off what the plan is. Engagement would then begin later this winter with the public and key stakeholder groups, and there'll be a public announcement that goes out in advance of that. And then so at the kind of culmination of the information gathering process would be the first check-in with council, and that would be a workshop. So we would gather information on kind of the current status and the services we're delivering now in facilities, as well as what we've heard from our core stakeholders, as well as the public, and then have a workshop with council. And then from there, we would dive into the more detailed plan development and analysis phase. And finally, we culminate with presenting a final draft plan to council for your consideration. And that's targeted for this summer. So any questions or comments? I'm here.
okay, we'll start with Councillor Sullivan.
No questions, just a comment that I'm really excited about this.
Councillor
Look forward to it. Thanks, Kevin.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, me too. I thought you were off, Kevin. This is awesome. I'm so glad it's coming forward to us and moving forward. I would please include the farmers market in your stakeholders if they're not already there. Thank you.
Today's my first day back after 5 weeks. So I drafted the report, I think, on the day before I left back in December, and it's largely still relevant. So that's always good.
That's always positive. Councillor Kettler.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, there was some comments about how this might blend into economic development, I'm guessing with the arts. Could you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, Kaylin, maybe I'll start and then you can jump in here. Kaylin's on the village staff planning team, recognizing that part of the value of this project or part of the support or rationale for proceeding was in the village's economic development strategy. And so that's understanding that that the arts community very much has an interest in the services that we provide, and that includes a number of our special events, as well as some of our facility planning. And there's businesses that, you know, we really do work very closely in partnership for the provision of arts and cultural events. So Kaylin, do you want to build off that in terms of any more specifics or your role kind of helping steer this and being kind of on the ground through the process?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And I would look at this as sort of a very important foundational piece that we need in order to undertake what's been requested of the economic development strategy. And so through the economic development strategy, we've been asked to look at things like creating infrastructure and supports for local artists. But, you know, Simple as simple. I think the analogy I quite often see is the band shell. Do we create a band shell? Where, when, who's it going to support? What size is it? Where does it go? Who's it, And so this type of study helps us lead us towards the type of services and the level of services that our community needs. From there, we can start to build on the economic development of knowing that we're putting good investment in infrastructure that's really going to help move the better economics for our arts community. So it's also going to help us. The Economic Development Steering Committee will be part of the stakeholder groups that is able to provide and provides input into this process. And so part of this process is to help us sort of start that preliminary piece as well through the economic development strategy.
That's great. Thank you. And then I was just wondering about, I know we're going to be getting a presentation at some point from UROC, but some of the planning that they're doing, is it going to be integrated into our recreation plan, or how are we working with them to make sure that those two things are aligned?
Although UROC absolutely is a stakeholder in this, we specifically chose to keep trail planning out of this as a focused activity, largely because it's a rather large initiative unto itself, and it can distract from other really core pieces that we wanted this plan to do in terms of the delivery of recreation, culture, and arts services, which, some of the trail-based special events, there's absolutely a role in this, but we didn't want it to be a trails master plan, which is a project unto itself. It actually is a conversation that we're in the preliminary stages of considering in a separate but parallel process with UROC and the timber companies who own the land in which the majority of the network's on. So that is information that I anticipate coming back to council with further information and seeking direction on sometime in 2022. Speaking of some of that trail planning. In the meantime, there still will be check-ins, and I'm in conversation with UROC about a delegation to council and continuing to maintain that connection.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much for your presentation, gentlemen. And I look forward to this coming about. It's going to be a tremendous amount of work, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of comments from the public, especially with the arts and culture. And I think we need to hear that loud and clear in the direction that they would like to go into, because we have so many cultural events on in this community, and they're all important for the development of this community. So thank you very much for your presentation. And we're just for discussion today. Yes, Councillor Brown?
Sorry, I forgot a question. I don't think I saw like a public engagement process. Are we just talking to stakeholders, or will there be like a broader public for those, arts and culture people who are not part of a nonprofit or a stakeholder group?
On page 11 of the report, it talks about public engagement, and they've given, it's in the middle page.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I noticed that right away. I thought, awesome, that's really good. We certainly do want to hear from the public. Okay, anything else from anybody? Okay, once again, thank you very much for all your work. Next, the committee received the quarterly reports to council for October, December 2021.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Okay.
And you're going to start at Clayton?
Yeah, sure. If that's okay, I'll start, and then Michelle will provide a quick overview of the financial plan quarterly report, and Courtney for the development services report. And then if there's any questions related to the action list, Rachel can also assist there too. So the report just summarized, I'll just quickly cover off, summarizes the activities that happened in the last quarter. But I also mentioned the cover report that we did leave in the overall report all activities relating to that either concluded in 2021 commenced in 2021. So there was an update of all the activities that occurred in 2021. So even though this is a fourth quarter report, it does also include all of the other activities that happened in 2021. Certainly the last quarter continued the challenges. I'd say 2021 were probably, like I think everyone has discussed. It's nice to see it go and disappear wherever it goes. We don't, we're not going to look back at it. It ended the kind of the same way it started, with many challenges, COVID related responses with us, especially the last month of December. They're entering into re-engaging safety plans and moving back to virtual just to ensure the health and safety of the staff and the community and council. So we did that fairly seamlessly without any impacts to any services relating to the COVID response in December there. Another couple of notes that happened. We certainly in the last quarter experienced a couple of major weather events. One was the atmospheric river, which didn't really maybe impact us as greatly as other parts of the region, but it did, there was a lot of other impacts from supply chains to just making us review a lot of our existing projects as we start analyzing both we talked about asset management, engineering, but also, what is our existing, natural assets, like some of those things that just, this is unknown territories that we've entered in. So lots of conversations. I know from a staff perspective, regionally, locally, we're working through, what those impacts have happened and what the future looks like. Really made us realize, that, and I think the province has really made it clear about how adaptive and resilient is, those words are really critical. It's not just response. Response is certainly one that we do a great job of, but how do we move forward? So that's been a focus. I think from an organization perspective, we're really focused on how we can adapt and be more resilient. The snowfall in December was also fairly significant. I think we're probably one of the only communities on the island. Still, there's a lot of snow here, and still here. It's still, that was a fairly large amount of snow that we received for that period there at the end of the year. Some of the key projects I just highlighted in the cover report that our staff been working on. We talk about 2021 continuing technology improvements to make from virtual meetings such as this easier for the community to access information. But we also have our utility and tax notice e-billing process that has been rolled out for 2022, but all that work was done in 2021. So that's exciting. And there'll be some information that'll be distributed to the community in the coming months here on that. We also, again, technology, utilizing this, we have some dam monitoring equipment that was installed, allowing operations to be able to monitor what is going on within the dam site there. And again, that's just a real improvement, allowing us to our staff to respond accordingly. And it's been something that's obviously been in the works for a number of years, and happy to get that in place. Across the community, like I think most of the other communities on Vancouver Island at this point in time, BC Hydro has switched to LED lights, street lights. So that project is complete, and for the most part, we've had very positive feedback. There's a few that we're working through with residents, that a couple of questions, and Hydro's been very supportive of having a conversation with that. So we've worked through those specific cases, but in general terms, it's great to see a move away from the high electrical use lights that were in there before to LED version there. So that's another change there. And we just spoke of one of the major projects, but the part of the fall was spent finalizing details relating to the Recreation and Arts Master Plan and also our Development Modernization Project. So both those projects were key projects within council priorities, and that work has all come to successfully awarding those projects and getting them underway. So it's exciting times for the community to get that rolling. And then the last highlight, one that I just wanted to just celebrate, and we continue to celebrate, is the reopening of the museum and the celebration, with the Cumberland District Historical Society, the great work that they did And it's really exciting for those that haven't visited there. You definitely take some time to do it. It's an amazing transition, and it already was an amazing asset to the community. It's even more now. So certainly I'm happy to answer any questions relating to the quarterly report that follows that summary page. And then if there are no questions, or once we're done that, I can certainly pass over to Michelle to talk about the financial quarterly update.
Okay, Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, thanks, Clayton. Just want to say again how much I love the format of this report. It's much improved. Yeah, I just had a question about the snow removal budget. I didn't really see it on there. I don't know if that's a really good thing to bring up, but kind of curious where we're at there.
Yeah, maybe Michelle can comment on that, or Rob. I know that there's like, even for payroll purposes, we were still processing a lot of the payroll even last week. So the numbers, we haven't finalized the numbers. I can certainly tell you that it will exceed our budget. But what that looks like, we don't know at this time, because right now our payroll's just been processed. I don't know, Michelle, if you're able to comment on that.
Yeah, I would say, and I'll talk a little bit about this next, but I would say that we have a pretty healthy surplus going into year-end adjustments and year-end process. So I would not normally, even if we go over on the snow budget, which I expect we will, I would not normally adjust it, bring in stabilization funds to cover that, unless we were if it was going to put us into a deficit. I will say that, we've spent a lot of money on the salt and the brine because of the snow and conditions that, operations have had to maintain. And we've spent all of the overtime in the budget, but not more than the overtime, which I was surprised. So, but yes, allocations haven't been finished yet. So I'm not sure how much of all of the internal labor that would have been spent doing other things have actually gone towards snow. That's more than likely what's happened is that they've had to drop everything and go into snow. So the labor budget will be over, but it looks like it'll be internal and taken from other areas of service.
Great, thanks so much. And just a huge shout out to everyone who did all that work over those snowfalls. Thanks a lot.
Councillor Brown, did you have something?
I do. I have a few questions. So the transportation master plan is in there somewhere. And I'm just wanting to clarify that it will include the arterial road plan for Cole Valley Estates, the extension of Penrith, and that the traffic circle and all of that. Is that included in that because that's part of the CDA, or are we able to integrate that into the transportation plan?
Yeah, I mean, the transportation plan that is going to be undertaken includes, the entire community. So all aspects related to, areas that are currently in place and also future development. So Bevan Road, that's another area that has not been part of past transportation review. So it will include all of those aspects related to that. And that project right now is we're just working through the details on the RFP there. So there's just to ensure things such as that, make sure all those aspects are included. And we're hoping we're using a consultant to assist us with it, because it's quite a complex process, and we'll hope to release that RFP in the coming days here.
Okay. There's also something that I just don't want to lose in the section on food security, which is a bylaw update, I guess. But since, we had a conversation about it a long time ago, but I think it's different planning staff now. And so I just don't want to lose it. Anyway, right now we allow for chickens, but we don't allow for the sale of eggs. So we need to update the bylaws so that we can allow for the chickens who are laying eggs, for those people who have those chickens, to allow them to sell the eggs. Otherwise, there's a black market in eggs happening in the village. So
I don't have a history on that one, so I'll have to look at what past resolutions we have on that one, but I'll find out.
thank you. I know we don't have I looked through the resolutions. That's why I'm raising it, because I just don't want to, I brought it up a couple of times in various ways. And so if you want me to make a motion or bring something else forward, I can do that. But just
I remember the discussion, but I don't remember what the result of that discussion was.
Yeah, it was a committee of
both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just didn't want to lose that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kettler.
Thanks, Clayton, for the report. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the community climate change assessment section and how we're the two items under climate change were behind and not started. And, you know, both of them deal with dealing with impacts of climate change and considerations relating to climate change response. And we are doing those things. We saw with atmospheric river, we had to deal with multiple infrastructure issues with that. You know, with the heat wave, we had to deal with opening facilities for that. So we are forced to deal with those issues. And I think if we could put a little bit more priority on coming up with a strategic plan to deal with these things, that we'd be better off than you know, chasing it as they're arising.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that one up. And this one is, and you're exactly right. When we as staff have talked about this, what we're finding is it's really not a one singular area. It's in emergency management response. It's in, you know, we talk about the wastewater treatment plant, how, you know, they're in, you know, the pre-design phase. What does that look like? It's and you know, those are just two examples. Transportation master plan, you know, what do all these things look like for future snow? You know, how are we going to, you know, adjust to address that, or rain, or how are this? So it's what I think we've learned through this conversation is that it's a very broad across all departments, all activities, and what we have not been able to do is spend time. We haven't had the capacity yet. I believe that we will have this to just at least define exactly how that is incorporated into each one of those conversations every time. So it's that, I think we talked about this with council a couple of months ago or a few months back, is emphasizing it as a cross-departmental, cross-organizational philosophy, or I'm not sure it's a policy, but like some outcome that makes sure that we consider those things each time we're talking about creating, you know, it's even part of the recreation and culture and arts plan is, you know, how do we adapt and address and mitigate for that? So it is in our work plan. It's just trying to make sure it's being done everywhere. We just haven't been able to kind of bring it all together and say, how do we form this together? So it is something that I know as staff we want to do. It's just finding enough time to be able to pull that together, all those initiatives together into one.
Yeah, and I know that, you know, things are maxed out, especially with the absenteeism rates of COVID going crazy right now. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that because it is a concern of mine, but I do understand staff's constraints.
Thank you very much, members of council. And thank you, Clayton, for the report. It's always very interesting to read the report and see how much work is being done by staff and accomplishing a lot of the goals that we set out. So thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. Next, we have Michelle.
Okay, so my financial services report talks about the village being in a surplus position and within budget. So at this stage, there's year-end adjustments that are needed, and also final invoices that have come in since this report. there's other adjustments that'll be needed to make, but we are in quite a good position. We do have a $321,000 surplus, and mainly that is because we saw some asset sales in 2021. We saw an increase in the planning and building inspection revenues, which helped. And other permit and licensing that went up. And then, of course, we have some projects that will be carried forward to 2022. And then we always have a little bit of surplus that's attributed to remuneration, because that's your largest piece of your budget. So any type of vacancy will create a surplus. So we did have a few timing differences between vacancies that allowed for surplus to be brought in, and that kind of stuff. And then, of course, for the second year in a row, we have a significant training and travel budget surplus, and that's to do with COVID. Not a lot of travel happening, so I expect that to turn around hopefully in 2022. And then once we have all the final invoices and all of the accruals and everything, then I expect that $321,000 to change. But yeah, and then we just have 3 commitments that are between $50,000 and $200,000 for 2021, and council saw and approved all of the commitments over $200,000 as well. And I can just answer any questions that council might have.
Any hands going up? Yeah, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. The surplus is good. I'm just curious, so the cultural and community events, so because those events haven't happened, there's a bit of a surplus there. Does that just go into the general revenue reserve, or where does that go?
Yeah, that would fall to your annual surplus. And then your surplus balance, if it's over 1.25 million, which is the new optimum level for that, anything over that will fall to your financial stabilization reserve. And then anything over their optimum will go to other capital reserves.
Right. So we don't have a reserve that's specific to those types of things. It would just go into general revenue. Okay. And when we had our training and travel surplus in whatever the first year of the pandemic was, 2021, we allocated some of that funding, reallocated it for council to use for more Zoom and webinar time. And I wonder if there's interest for us to do that again. So at least we're getting, it looks like some of the conferences that were supposed to be in person this year may also move back to online. And so anyway, we're building up a bit of a surplus there where we could be doing education for ourselves. So I would encourage us to look at that.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, then we will go on to the next is protective services. And I assume that Clayton, you'll be answering all of those questions?
Yes, the fire chief is away on vacation this week, so I'll do my best.
So are you going to give an overview or just ask for questions?
I will just ask for questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the one key one there that's noted in the report is that we do have just received just after in the new year that our deputy chief has provided retirement notice. So that's something that certainly exciting for him, and will have to be something that we'll begin the process of putting into our work plan on what a replacement plan looks like. But in general, the fire responses in talking to the chief have been pretty consistent to the previous years, not a huge adjustment. He did note that certainly we did see during the winter weather that we experienced at the end of December, there were definitely and he said that the spike was definitely during that winter time, that they did have a number of MVA responses, and where this last couple of years they haven't had the numbers that they've had in previous years. So that was has kept them busy responding to that.
Okay. Questions? Councillor Kettler?
Just to note that he did say that the overdose calls have increased this year, and yeah, that has to do with the private members bill that I'll be speaking to in regular council today.
Councillor Brown, did you have your hand up?
I did, thank you. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The first responder rates up to 108 over 74 last year. So that's something of note. But the parking is way down, and general customer service, does anybody know what that means? Because it went from 14 to 56, which seems alarming.
Are you referring to the bylaw here? Is it by or
I don't know.
page 49?
No, it's on the page 48. Is that the one you're referring to?
Sorry, I didn't write down the page number when I made the note.
So I do know that if it is bylaw, definitely, if you recall 2021, that we did increase bylaw services, and yeah, I think I see on page 49 at the very bottom, it talks about general customer. So there was a considerable council gave direction. We hired a bylaw officer to assist on weekends and evenings, and that did continue into the fall there. And so that was all really about awareness and having conversation with people. And council has approved for 2022 that a seasonal bylaw position to be in place there, and that is being funded through restart funds. So we'll continue that process. The chief and I just spoke about that the other day, about what that will look like. So we'll begin that process. And I think that was 2 or 3 days a week there that we were doing it. But it's the increase in general customer service requests was a lot to do with bylaw and COVID, responding out of the lake and different areas. That's what that note refers to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions concerning the entire report? No? Okay, next we will go into development services. Welcome, Courtney.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So in the fourth quarter of 2021, Village received 7 new development applications, and during the same time period, 6 applications were closed. And in addition, we have 33 ongoing. We track building permits separately, and 15 building permits were issued in the fourth quarter of 2021. So we had about the same number of new applications as development applications that were closed. So that's helpful to note in managing our workload with our current resources. Also in this quarter, Hull Valley Estates reactivated their next phase subdivision application. We received a proposal for a new manufactured home park. I've received and reviewed that, and you'll see that on the council agenda tonight. And in December, just at the end of the last quarter, we received a new rezoning application for a mixed-use development that includes 24 affordable dwellings, 25 small residential lots, and a daycare. This is just to list some of the notable development applications that have come in the last quarter. In terms of projects, we prepared for public launch of the development approvals, process modernization, as well as the vacation rentals regulations projects in the last quarter. And you'll see that the survey is now active for the vacation rental regulations project. Included a little bit of information about an annual summary here, given that this is the report on the last quarter of 2021. So there were 45 new development applications for the whole year, which is the second highest number of any previous year. And in fact, included on page 61 of the agenda package, a table and a graph that shows the number of development applications since 2016 for comparison purposes. So we're relatively high since the peak, maintaining the peak started in 2017. And we are expecting more development applications in the next year with the Maple Street subdivision close to completion. And then on the last page of my section here, page 62 of the agenda package, this is a building trends report that we do annually. So we were able to complete this for all of 2021. This is for building permits. So you'll see it's notable that the number of single family dwelling building permits peaked in 2017 also, and is kind of on its way down. And I think that is related to mainly the Coal Valley Estates development. And we would expect in the next year or two, depending on how that new phase goes, that we will likely see another increase in those building permit applications. So thank you. I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, questions from anybody? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I did want to note that decline in single family dwellings. That's great to see. Infill and multi-family is definitely more environmentally better. Just better all around. But I have a couple of specific questions, and I'm going to try and find the page number. There's 3216 Sutton Road. There's a 3-lot development. Where is that?
Oh yes, is that under subdivision? The last one on the
there's subdivision. Yeah. So I'm just curious because I walk down Sutton Road all the time, and there's 2 houses there, but they don't seem to be at that address. And then there's also the Derwent 4-lot subdivision, but that doesn't seem to be at that address either. So just curious what's happening there.
Well, I will certainly double check the addresses to see if we made any errors in the number.
Yeah, or the pin's wrong when I Googled it. That could be as well.
Sure, yes.
So yeah, so it looks like it's on Sutton, but it could be the addresses are on Dunsmuir, but it looks like they're on Sutton, but there's 2 new builds on there that I presume are so I guess my question is, if it's a 3-lot subdivision, there's 2, it's only 2. There's 2 in the lot. Maybe the lot's bigger. Maybe there's another house. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it out. Kaylin knows.
Kaylin has.
Just being familiar with the addresses, I believe 3216 are the properties that are at the very bottom of Sutton on the corner at the yellow gate that were built in alongside the wetlands there. The 2 you're referring to at the corner of Derwent, there's actually 3 properties because it includes the house that's on Derwent behind the 2 new ones.
Okay.
So they subdivided this, but I believe 3216 is the one at the bottom of the road.
Okay, so those are old.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, thank you, Kaylin. 3216 is at the bottom of the road. It's a panhandle lot, so you don't see a house from the street. So there's a house behind, and there'll be 2 very small strata lots created.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. It's been driving me crazy.
Anyone else have any questions? Nope, then we'll move on to the last one, and it's outstanding action items. And I think that's Rachel.
The Rachel may not have video, so there.
Hi, I'm here. So this is our outstanding action items report, or the list of council resolutions, and it shows the matters that have been completed since the last quarterly report, which was presented in October, I believe, and the items that remain in progress. And happy to, if council members have any questions, happy to answer the ones I'm able to.
Questions from members of council? Yes, Clayton.
Just as a reminder on this, because I even need to remind myself. So the ones that are any action-wise have been put, they are also in the strategic updates that are the start of the report. So if there's any major ones, the only ones that are not listed in the strategic report that I spoke of at the very beginning would be things such as a letter of support written to, you know, X group, like that. Some of the smaller, or like a bylaw, you know, maybe there's a bylaw update. So any of the ones that are in there, a lot of them are also reported as, it could be emerging items or updates relating to specific projects. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Councillor Brown? No? Okay, your light's coming on. No questions? Well, thank you very much. That completes that. Now we are going into question period. So anybody that has any questions concerning items on the agenda, please don't hesitate to email info@cumberland.ca using subject line question period, and we will give you a few moments before we move on.
We do have one question, Mayor Baird.
Yes.
Came in a few minutes ago. Does the asset management policy comply with the OCP policies and objectives?
Clayton?
Yes, there is a reference within the asset management policy on page, just trying to see here, there is a related document. So page, or the final page of the document talks about policies that are aligned and have been reviewed. So certainly when the time is to update the OCP, this asset management policy will be another document that we would update. So there's a list of ones there that would be related documents to this. So it's noted in there as one of the overarching documents that has been reviewed as part of that. But there is, at this point in time, there's not a connection between the two. It's not that they're attached, but there is, you know, the intent is that this policy would support the OCP as well.
Thank you very much. Is that okay? Okay.
One last check, no more questions.
Thank you very much. Would somebody like to move the next recommendation for the closed portion?
Sure. I'll move that council close the meeting to the public pursuant to section 90 of the community charter to consider personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality, and discussions with municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purposes of preparing an annual report under section 98 annual municipal report.
Second. Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried. Motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?